if anyone else have any questions or comments? One more guy. Over here. Okay.
Yes. Okay, I don't know a lot about politics, but I actually work at FirstLink in Fargo, which is for like the 98 suicide crisis lifeline. So I kind of hear from people all the time, and one of the biggest issues I hear about a lot across North Dakota is homelessness, especially out in rural areas where there's not really a lot of shelters. And a common thing I have to do a lot is just tell people who are asking us for help that there's nothing out there. And most of the shelters, they're just around here, Fargo, Grand Forks, but if you go near Dickinson, Williston, there's not really anything. And I'm just kind of wondering why that is and if there's anything that can be done about it. That's about it.
I don't know which particular one, but I'm going to go legislative on this one. So Ryan, you're the odd one on this one.
Right. So 98 is obviously very important. I know a lot about FirstLink, and I know how difficult it is. And I know we do have a lot of gaps across the state in regards to homelessness. It's particularly, I know we have, even with youth homelessness, is particularly up in the Devil's Lake Basin. We have a huge problem up there where there's a lot of kids that are couch surfing and sleeping on that. What we do as a state, we need to reprioritize where we're spending that money. We have tried in the last couple of legislative sessions to put more money into homelessness shelters across the state. We need to do better at getting people housed in general. We need to do better at that and making sure that we have more housing available in the state. Now, many of my colleagues on the other side don't want to put any money towards it because they think that money towards it will boost rents, will keep boosting rents and stuff like that, because if we keep doing that. But we do need to help people get into housing. And we can do that. We can leverage, we have a Bank of North Dakota. We can leverage that bank to help with helping subsidize first-time home buyers and help them get into first-time home buyers through that program, through some of those programs. We also need to make sure that we encourage cities to loosen up their regulations on where you can build housing. Because I think one of the biggest problems that we have is sometimes they don't want to have a multi-unit housing that's in a historically single family, but you can add some. We have a mobility issue in our housing market right now, is that people can't move up into more expensive housing because they're stuck where they're at, because there should be a natural transition from your first-time home to your middle income and to a higher income. We need to make sure we have all that breadth there from those all entire levels. And we also need to make sure that we have the ability to allow granny homes on multifamily, where you can have multifamily units within those areas as well. So we need to make sure that we have those. Now, a lot of that is local issues that we need to help encourage, but we have money that we can help subsidize some of this stuff to get people into the house the first time. Because there's also another issue, is we have a mental health crisis and we have a substance abuse crisis in this country. And if you're not stable, you can't solve any of that. The first side is you need to be stable. And the only way to be stable is to be in a house. So we need to get that first, and we need people in housing first so that they can work on the rest. And then, guess what? They become productive members of society. They contribute. They pay taxes. They actually grow our society, so it's actually a net benefit for the rest of us.
Thank you for answering the phone. I'm going to start with that first. We have a mental health crisis in North Dakota. And we have a mental health crisis on the farm, with the toughest farm crisis we've had in about 40 years. I got a phone call last week from an individual from my home area who said he knows 3 farmers that have committed suicide since last spring. I ran into another person around the Jamestown area who said that there was 4 or 5 people that he knew So as the ag commissioner, I'm gonna start having some town hall meetings, some round tables to bring healthcare people in, to bring farmers and ranchers and people that are interested that know more than I do about the situation, but we're gonna talk about it. And I think the ag department ought to be there to help. You know, talk about a bully pulpit, we need to help people before they're dead. There's always hope for somebody until they quit breathing. And I'd like to visit with you afterwards. You might have some ideas. And if anybody wants to be a part of it, of all these people that are here, you're welcome. You people out there that are listening to us, if you want to get involved with it, talk to me afterwards. Because every life is of value. And when they're quit breathing, it's too late. But it's not too late right now. Thank you.
One of the biggest things there is that there are families out there that if the individual in their family has mental health issues, but they don't have a criminal record and they're not in the system, there's no way for them to get help because the system does not want to start with somebody who's not already in the system. It's kind of a catch-22 problem.
We need to fix it.
You wanted to add something there?
Yeah, as a correctional nurse, and I work mental health as well. What I've discovered in North Dakota, there aren't systems in place. I mean, thank you for your job, for what you do, and I'm sorry, condolences to your leader, Kirk, that he passed away. But what we have, you know, in Jamestown, we have the state hospital and the prison, but there's no in between. There's no halfway house. I think some of these places get a bonus up to maybe 1,000 or so to house the people coming right out of either prison or mental health. We see it in Jamestown. But what's happening is you can't assimilate somebody directly fresh from either the prison or mental health into just a everyday living society. There has to be something, like a halfway house, or just some type of where they can get training, they can get encouragement to whatever their issues are, and maybe job placement. I know there's like alpha opportunities in Jamestown, but for the most part. And I ran around this whole entire country on foot across all 50 states. And the homelessness is nationwide is really bad, and the addictive behaviors is so bad. But you know, at the end of the day, these people need our compassion, our empathy, and some of them are just discarded. And I'd like to see people stand up and just offer a hand, or just say, you know, keep going, keep climbing that ladder. But there are some downfalls in this state, and as working on the front lines of that, I've seen it. Thank you.
Can I follow up? So one of the things, obviously in the last legislative session, we allocated a lot of money to a new state hospital, which is centralized, which I understand the need for a state hospital because we need to have the most severe have a place for them. However, I think it's also an outdated model for what we need in the state. We should have allocated more money to put that around the state in all these different locations. Because the problem that she's talking about in Jamestown is that when somebody leaves those hospitals, they end up into those communities and they may not be fully recovered, and then they cause more crime in those communities. Part of the reason that is because they're also away from their families. We need to have facilities within the communities that are out there so that they can get help with their families where they're at, and not necessarily just a centralized location, because it continues to cause a problem in that area. I think it was a mistake for us to allocate as much money for the state hospital. I think we needed something there, but a private institution in Fargo built a hospital about the same size for about half the price as what we're spending at the state hospital. So that seems to be a problem for me. And I think a lot of it is also sweetheart deals with the developer. So we need to make sure to have that transparency. And that developer was in the legislature. So we'll put that forth there.
Of course they were.
So I think that we need to really relook at the whole thing, and we need to have mental health all across the state, not just centralized in one area.
And that's one of the biggest things that Bismarck deals with, is because it's got prison
Yep.
there. People get out of prison, they got nowhere to go, they gotta stay there to check in with their parole officer. There's a 12-block area on the east side of town that is basically the Bismarck version of the ghetto, because the ex-cons have to check in for the next year and they congregate there.
Well, and that's and part of the problem is we don't have a very good reentry program. And that's part of the problem. We need to have better reentry programs so that people can succeed. Because and that goes back to the recidivism rate. Because if we don't help people reenter from being in prison, because 90% of all the people in prison will be back on the street. It's just a fact. They will eventually be out here because there's no lifetime. We can't house somebody for a lifetime on every crime. So we need to be able to have transitions back to reality and become good members. And that includes making sure that we have landlords that are willing to rent to cons. And we need to have protection so that they have a place to stay. Because that's another issue, is that sometimes they can't even find a place to stay because landlords won't even rent to a convicted felon. And there's nothing in law that prevents that.
Right, sometimes the only landlords that will rent to them are ex-cons themselves.
Yep.
So